Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator SC-300 exam updated questions are the best material for you to clear the test easily. 1. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant that contains a user named User1. You need to ensure that User1 can create new catalogs and add resources to the catalogs they own. What should you do? A. From the Roles and Administrators blade, modify the Service Support Administrator role. B. From the Identity Governance blade, modify the Entitlement Management settings. C. From the Identity Governance blade, modify the roles and administrators for the general catalog. D. From the Roles and Administrators blade, modify the group's administrator role. 2. Your company requires that users request access before they can access corporate applications. You register a new enterprise application named MyApp1 in Azure Active Dilatory, Azure AD, and configure single sign-on (SSO) for MyApp1. Which settings should you configure next for MyApp1? A. Self-service. B. Provisioning. C. Roles and administrators. D. Application proxy. 3. You have a Microsoft 365 tenant. You need to ensure that you view Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, audit log information by using Azure Monitor. What should you do first? A. Run the Get-AzureADAudit DirectoryLogs cmdlet. B. Create an Azure AD workbook. C. Run the Set-AzureADTenant Detail cmdlet. D. Modify the diagnostic settings for Azure AD. 4. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant named conto.so.com that has Azure AD identity protection enabled. You need to implement a sign-in risk remediation policy without blocking access. What should you do first? A. Configure access reviews in Azure AD. B. Enforce Azure AD password protection. C. Implement multi-factor authentication (MFA) for all users. D. Configure self-service password reset (SSPR) for all users. 5. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant that contains cloud-based enterprise apps. You need to group related apps into categories in the My Apps portal. What should you create? A. Tags. B. Collections. C. Naming policies. D. Dynamic groups. 6. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant named contoso.com. All users who run applications registered in Azure AD are subject to conditional access policies. You need to prevent the users from using legacy authentication. What should you include in the conditional access policies to filter out legacy authentication attempts? A. A Cloud Apps or Actions condition. B. A User Risk condition. C. A Client Apps condition. D. A Sign-in Risk condition. 7. You have 2,500 users who are assigned Microsoft Office 365 Enterprise E3 licenses. The licenses are assigned to individual users. From the Groups blade in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, you assign Microsoft 365 Enterprise E5 licenses to the users. You need to remove the Office 365 Enterprise E3 licenses from the users by using the least amount of administrative effort. What should you use? A. The administrative units blade in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. B. The Set-AzureADUser cmdlet. C. The groups blade in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. D. The sec-msol user license cmdlet. 8. Your company recently implemented Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, Privileged Identity Management, PIM. While you review the roles in PIM, you discover that all 15 users in the IT department at the company have permanent security administrator rights. You need to ensure that the IT department users only have access to the security administrator role when required. What should you configure for the security administrator role assignment? A. Expire eligible assignments after from the role settings details. B. Expire active assignments after from the role settings details. C. Assignment type to active. D. Assignment type to eligible. 9. You have a Microsoft 365 tenant. All users have mobile phones and laptops. The users frequently work from remote locations that do not have Wi-Fi access or mobile phone connectivity. While working from the remote locations, the users connect their laptop to a wired network that has Internet access. You plan to implement multi-factor authentication, MFA. Which MFA authentication method can the users use from the remote location? A. A notification through the Microsoft Authenticator app. B. Email. C. Security questions. D. A verification code from the Microsoft Authenticator app. 10. You have an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD tenant. For the tenant, users can register applications as set to no. A user named admin1 must deploy a new cloud app named app1. You need to ensure that admin1 can register app1 in Azure AD. The solution must use the principle of least privilege. Which role should you assign to admin1? A. Application developer in Azure AD. B. App configuration data owner for subscription 1. C. Managed application contributor for subscription 1. D. Cloud application administrator in Azure AD.